The title that I've come up with thus far for my chapter is Do You See Me Now? I wrote this when I was 23. I am now 25, so I might give you little updates here and there. I will sometimes shorten cerebral palsy to just CP, but just know that they mean the same thing, and I hope you enjoy. Here we go. Disability is a complicated word because there is no all-encompassing way to describe it. Sure, there are dictionary definitions out there, but those definitions do little to give the person reading them an idea of what someone who lives with a disability experiences on a daily basis. There is no cookie-cutter way to experience disability because every person has their own experiences and challenges to handle. My disability is cerebral palsy. Living with CP has 100% shaped me into the person I am today. I can also say with 100% certainty that I am proud of the person who is writing this story. I can't imagine my life without CP because I wouldn't be me without it. Sure, I'm confident within myself as I write this, and for the most part, that's still true. But growing up, I severely lacked confidence and felt incredibly sorry for myself. My hope in sharing my story is to show that experiencing disability is a journey, and my particular journey is one of growth and self-acceptance. I was born 8 weeks early and then spent 6 weeks in the hospital after. It wasn't until I was 9 months old that my doctor realized something wasn't right because I wasn't hitting the typical milestones. Finally, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Once my parents had an answer, they did the best they could to learn everything about CP. I have to give my mom and dad a lot of credit because all they ever wanted from me was, and still is, that I lead the best life that I can. I started physical therapy at 9 months old and continued it regularly until I graduated from high school. For those listening, I graduated when I was 17. Physical therapy and I had what I would call a love-hate relationship. My legs were at one point so weak that I would move around in a wheelchair. My other options were to be carried in someone's arms or crawl. When I would crawl, I would go as fast as I could to be a speed crawler. In my mind, I was going to be the best crawler that I could. It sounds really silly now, but I could really move around and had my own sense of freedom outside of sitting in my wheelchair. The floor became my comfort zone for the first couple years of my life because I didn't need anyone's help to get somewhere. There were times I enjoyed being in the wheelchair, especially when someone would offer to push me around because I felt important. Those were the times when I wouldn't push myself in physical therapy and I would stay in my comfort zone. Those were the good days, and then there were the days when I just wanted to fit in with all the other kids my age. After having too many days of feeling like I didn't fit in and being so sad I would cry, my mindset completely changed. I was ready to push myself just to see how far I could go. When I say my mindset changed, I mean that I threw myself into whatever the doctor wanted to try to treat my CP. They tried putting my legs in casts for 36 weeks, and each week they would put my feet in a new position. The hope was that this would stretch my ankle muscles and they would loosen up. 36 weeks of needing constant assistance wasn't easy, and neither were the 2-hour trips to Chicago there and back for my parents, but I knew I had to give it a shot. The casts did what they were supposed to do, but the results were only temporary. The casts were effective to a point, but all the muscle I did have in my calves melted away because I couldn't use my legs for 36 weeks. I then had to work to build the muscle up again, and it's been a huge challenge that's still ongoing, even at 25. I'm not sure I'll be able to reach that muscle again. All I can do is my best. I don't hold any anger or resentment about that experience because my parents were trying out all my available options at the time. They had no way of knowing what would be successful. I can't fault anyone for trying to give me the best life possible. My doctor then told my parents that Botox could be used to benefit me. He told them that they would take 2 shots of Botox for each leg and inject the Botox into my hamstrings. As a kid, shots hurt, but a shot in the arm was nothing compared to the shots in a sensitive area like the hamstring. I remember they would hold me down to give me the shots because I would kick and scream. Looking back on it, I think it hurt more in my head leading up to the shots than the shots themselves. But they still hurt pretty bad. The Botox shots did work for me, but the results were again short-lived. Once they stopped working, the next thing to try was hamstring surgery. When my doctor first brought up surgery, I was in second grade. In my 7-year-old brain, I thought it was great. I thought this was going to fix me. I was going to be closer to being like everyone else. Back then, I thought I was going to be more normal and things would be fine. I remember coming out of the doctor's office so excited. I remember having a huge desire to tell my brother. I was ready to get on with the surgery. I wasn't thinking about the pain of the surgery or the recovery time or the hard work I'd have to put into physical therapy because this was my quote-unquote big solution to help me. I was in for a rude awakening when surgery was over. It pushed me harder than I was ready for, and I wasn't prepared for the pain or the effort that was required to build up my strength. The surgery did what it was realistically supposed to accomplish, but that didn't match up with my lofty expectations of what surgery was going to do for me. The next 2 years or so went pretty well. I was doing so well that I hardly used my arm crutches. This gave me a false sense of security. I went from using a wheelchair for mobility to a walker, to arm crutches, to being on the verge of walking without assistive equipment. This was everything I was working towards, and I got overly confident. I thought the worst of it was over, and it was only onward and upward from there. The thought of regression never crossed my mind until it happened. In my head, I had made it through the worst times, and I was only going up from there. I became really stubborn and didn't feel like wearing my leg braces. This turned out to be a huge mistake, and it's one that still affects me to this day. Because I didn't have proper ankle support, a bone in my left ankle shifted and required surgery. So, to put it back in the correct position. All the progress I had made got washed away because the recovery process took so long. Actually, much longer than they thought it would. For the longest time, it was hard to put weight on my left foot. I'd say roughly 3 months or so. The surgery took place in 5th grade, so I was roughly 10 years old by then. I'm 23 now, and now, talking to you, I'm 25. And I still haven't been able to get back to the level of using no assistive technology. I will use one arm crutch for short distances, but most of the time it's 2 now. I don't know that I'll ever get to that level again, but it's something I'll always strive for. I've talked about many different treatment options to manage my CP, but I want to give you more insight into my years of physical therapy, because without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. I've mentioned already that I started physical therapy at 9 months old once my parents were told I had cerebral palsy. I'm thankful to my parents for many things in my life, but putting me in physical therapy was one of the best decisions they made in helping me manage my CP. Before I was old enough to attend school, my parents would drive to Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago on a weekly basis for therapy sessions. They would push me to my limit, where sometimes I would cry because I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't understand how beneficial it would be in life. I still have the booklet of exercises they made for my mom and dad that included pictures so they would know if I was doing them correctly at home in between visits. It was through these many therapy sessions that I transitioned from my wheelchair to a walker. When I was old enough to attend school, I started with 3 30-minute sessions every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. When school was out for the summer, I would go to the local hospital for 6 weeks, once a week. This was how I transitioned from my walker to arm crutches. Shortly after I moved to using crutches, therapy was cut down to 2 sessions a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. It stayed that way through middle school, and by the time I was in high school, I was down to 1 day a week until I graduated. Managing my CP has been in my hands for the last 9 years, because now at 25, 2 years later. There's no one there to sit and guide me anymore. If I want to walk without my arm crutches, it's up to me to get there. At the beginning, the thought of not having regular physical therapy sessions was a relief because it was something I wanted for a long time. But it was actually terrifying knowing that everything is in my hands. I choose where I go from here on out. It was a tough pill to swallow. By this time, I knew I was ready, but I was stepping into the unknown. And to be honest with you, now at 25, I'm thinking about going back. It was time to take everything I'd learned and just put it to good use on my own. I was prepared, and this says I've kept up pretty well, but again, I'm questioning if I should go back. I had to dive in head first and give it up my all, even though I kinda haven't always. Didn't live up to that. Almost 17 years of physical therapy has done me a lot of good. It's allowed me to gain a good respect for my body, and I'm in tune with it and what it can handle. That's something I keep in mind because I'm constantly trying to stay healthy for the future. I appreciate what I've been able to do instead of what I can't as I've gotten older. I'm hopeful for the future. CP is more than just dealing with the physical challenges that come with it. I've talked mostly about some of the physical journey I've been on, which, if I'm being honest, was much harder to write about than I anticipated because it's so much more than words on a page. There are so many stories and memories that go along with what I've written down here that it was a bit overwhelming and is too much to write. I said this was a journey of acceptance. I want to shed some light on dealing with the emotional aspect for you. When I was a little kid, I really didn't understand what disability was. I knew I needed extra help, but I was just me. It was when I started school that I met my best friend Thomas. I had a vague idea that I was different from the other kids, but I liked talking to people. I liked some of the extra attention people paid to me on most days, but sometimes the extra attention was too much. There were days I would cry at night because I just wanted to be like everyone else. I didn't understand why I had to have cerebral palsy. I always thought I was hiding my sadness, but little did I know I wasn't concealing it well. I'm so thankful that my parents have always been the strongest support system for me. They always wanted me to go to camps, to get to know other kids, but I was always too nervous and shy. I would get in my own way. My friend group was small all the way through high school because I was afraid to put myself out there. It's funny looking back at my school years. All the way through high school, it seemed like everyone knew my name. I was popular and yet unpopular at the same time. Even though so many people knew who I was, my friend group was limited. So many people would say hi to me, but we wouldn't get to go beyond that to form an actual friendship. Cerebral palsy definitely shaped my social life because I let it control my life. Because I was so concerned of what others thought of me, I would not even try to put myself out there for them to get to know me beyond the fact that I wore leg braces and walked with arm crutches. I thought back then that all people saw was my CP and not me. The majority of friends I had, besides my best friend since preschool, Thomas, were female. In my head, it seemed like they could look past my disability easier than males. I didn't like playing sports or being outside or roughhousing, so I thought I didn't have common ground with males, so I mostly avoided them. Having female friends was more comfortable for me anyways, because growing up, the cousins I had that were the closest in age were female, so I stayed in my comfort zone. I have since gained male friends, um, because I didn't want to venture out of my comfort zone. I would spend my weekends alone in my room. My biggest problem was that I didn't think people understood me, but I didn't let people break through the walls I put around myself. I felt isolated from people my own age. Sure, not everyone would have given me a chance, but I cared most of the separation between myself and others. But I can't read. But I created most of the separation between myself and others. It's hard telling how much of that separation was real and how much I imagined. But I became sad and lonely. I stayed in the negative space through junior high and half of high school. Sure, I put a smile on and people wouldn't suspect. My parents were doing the best they could to show that life was so much more than I was allowing it to be. I just wasn't ready to move beyond this sadness. My parents were there to hoist me up when I needed them. This all changed when I finally just grew tired. I was tired of feeling alone and sad. I was tired of letting my disability control my happiness. I started to wonder if my negativity wasn't apparent to other people. Were they avoiding me because they didn't want to deal with my negativity? I did my best to have a positive outlook, but I didn't know how to start. When you've been reserved for so many years with a bad attitude, it's a bit of an undertaking. I was ready to change, but didn't know how to start. Eventually, I was able to lighten up. I was able to find my sense of humor, and was able to laugh at myself. Once I was able to focus on things that I liked to do and stopped focusing on what people would think or say, I started to really enjoy myself. This transition started towards the end of my sophomore year, so by the time junior year rolled around, I could actually go to a football game and school dances and enjoy myself with my friends and not focus on if I was fitting in. When I started worrying about myself and not my disability, I truly started living, and the weight lifted off my shoulders. I was looking at life through much brighter eyes than in middle school. I wasn't carrying around a sadness and heaviness, and I was happy and relieved that I had finally gotten to a better place. Believe me, it wasn't easy. I think this was the time I realized that I was not my cerebral palsy, and it was just a part of me and not all of me. This was one of the best realizations I've ever come to. It's my life to live and no one else's. People are going to talk and have their opinions of what disability is, but I live with it every day. I have to find acceptance of my disability in myself before I can even consider whether others outside my support system can accept it. I did have one great benefit in high school that pushed me towards acceptance of myself and my disability. In high school, 5 other kids had CP to varying degrees. Some of them I had known for years and others were brand new to me, but we were able to form genuine friendships. We had our own social circle where we could share our good and bad days. We had our own built-in support system we could just bounce off of. They were a huge part of me finding my confidence, and some have become the most important people in my life. They probably aren't aware of how much I value their friendship, but they helped turn me into a person I liked. Thankfully, at 25 now, I can accept my cerebral palsy as a part of who I am with pride. If a temporarily able-bodied person wants to judge me just because I live with a physical disability, then I don't need to have them in my life. That is something that will stick with me moving forward. Those who matter don't mind. Cerebral palsy shaped my college career and helped give me some of my proudest moments so far in life. I wrote that I accepted my disability in high school, but I grew into that idea in college, particularly when I decided to study sociology at ISU. Going to a university tested how I dealt with my disability on a physical and mental level. My community college was a little atypical than some. My entire community college career took place in a satellite location away from the main campus. My community college experience took place in a converted post office. Being in an old post office meant that it was compact. So I always say community college was a hallway because every room was down a single hallway. I didn't have to walk far at all. Transferring to ISU really expanded my horizon. I now was living on my own for the first time and having to walk a block or so to get to my class instead of just feet. At first, I was in over my head. There were days I'd get done with class and just immediately lay down when I got back to my dorm. The transition forced me to reevaluate how I was taking care of myself. After a few weeks and becoming more physically active, I was able to physically navigate campus better. Cerebral palsy made me aware of how much I could handle in a day, so I was able to become more efficient throughout the day, so I could save energy. By the time I graduated, I had mastered my new terrain, even with cerebral palsy. I remember someone saying to me, "It must be hard getting around campus," and I remember telling them, "I manage." Cerebral palsy didn't make college unmanageable. It just put challenges in my way, challenges to overcome by myself. Through the help of friends and communicating with my professors, that I might be late to class, so I didn't overdo it and fall making my way across campus. Communication proved to be my biggest tool in handling college and my disability. I was able to address my needs and accomplish my goals. Since my community college experience was a little atypical, I wasn't surrounded by clubs or organizations looking for members, so transferring to a large university and being submerged in that atmosphere was intense. I wasn't sure of what I was into. I connected with the Disability Services Department, and this led to me becoming involved with a new organization called Student Disability Network. This is an organization that helps connect those with disabilities and those who are currently temporarily able-bodied. And just for your reference, temporarily able-bodied is just the idea that even if a person isn't dealing with disability now, they could deal with it later on in life. I learned that in sociology. But SDN was aimed at bringing those who are temporarily able-bodied and those with disabilities together, aimed at bridging the gap to show that those with disabilities and those who don't have disabilities currently are much more similar than we sometimes allow ourselves to see. When I was asked to become a founding member of an organization focused on disability, I remember being incredibly excited. I remember thinking, wow, look how far I've come. All those years of being insecure about my cerebral palsy, and here I was supporting others with disabilities and helping facilitate events between people with a disability and those who didn't have one. Something I had struggled with for years because I was too afraid. I felt like I had really come into my own in that moment. I've now become a champion for those who experience living with a disability. I love helping people see that those with disabilities are not different. We are people with our own experiences who want to live the best lives we can, just like someone who doesn't experience living with a disability. We are all human, and we're all on a spectrum of ability. I personally think we should focus on the ability, not disability. That outlook is something I'll take with me moving forward in life as I connect with more people. Cerebral palsy has its challenges on a daily basis that shape me into the person I am. But there have been benefits. I feel like I have gained a lot by living with a disability. I consider myself a generally open and accepting person. I know that people can pass judgment on me just because I walk with arm crutches, so I try my hardest not to judge a book by its cover. CP has made me mentally tough and showed me that I can persevere when things get tough, when I have the right support in family and friends. I've learned to never give up on myself or others because you can never be sure what someone is capable of accomplishing. CP has made me kind and compassionate, and I'm proud to say that it has turned me into a positive person willing to help anyone I can. That's kind of why I started my disabled experience. It has taught me a few lessons I can now pass on to others. There are things I wish I could tell my younger self, but I could tell others who read this. I would like to tell my younger self and others who live with disability to live your life. Don't worry about what people may or may not think of you. You have to live your life for yourself and do what makes you happy and not to please anyone but yourself. I would also like to say it's about quality, not quantity. Friends are important, but it's even better to have people who accept you as you are than to be considered popular. I'd also say put yourself out there and live your life to the fullest. You won't have to say, what if, instead of say, I know, because I did it. To those who don't know what it's like to live with a disability, I'd like to say, don't be afraid to reach out and talk. You never know what you have in common with someone just by looking at them. The more you talk and communicate, the less mysterious the word disability will be. My hope with writing my story was to give the reader an inside look into living with a physical disability and peel back the veil to show that this isn't an us versus them dynamic that society makes it out to be. We aren't all that different from each other. It just may take communication to break down those walls.